was after Scott Early's blood? Just because I was a Mormon? That was purely ignorant. Half the time, even good people think all Mormons are nuts in a cult where the church leader marries you off at the age of 13. Maybe some of that stuff used to go on 100 years ago. But a few hundred years ago in Europe, Catholics went around stretching people on the rack, too. They're not doing that anymore, either. All blood atonement means to regular Mormons is just that shedding someone else's blood is the most terrible thing, and atonement is making up for your sin. It's a metaphor, like the kind you learn in English class. Mormons think you have to do good to make up for your sins, not just say you're sorry. When I set off for California, I didn't think that Scott Early had atoned for his sins. But I didn't really know what I would do about that. I thought it would be revealed to me. I never thought about violence. What happened just because of the tiniest mistake. I had that to live with. And I would always know how much I'd let my family down. My parents trusted me completely, and I betrayed their trust. I lied, and I'd never lied before. I told them only part of the truth. I told them I needed to be away from Utah, to be away from the shed. I was going to San Diego, a sunny city of young people and young dreams, to go to a good community college where I could train to be an EMT, the work I planned to do to pay for my college. Yes, I saw the looks my parents exchanged. I knew those looks meant that they knew Scott Early was in California, but didn't think that I knew. I played innocent. They believed me. But under all that innocence was a wayward heart. I might have felt very mature, even old, because of everything our family had been through. I learned something, though. Suffering and finishing high school early doesn't mean you're mature. It takes a lot more than that. Papa told me once, right after my sisters died, that atonement wasn't something a regular person on earth can bring on someone else. He said it was between the sinner and God. He was right, but I couldn't hear it. I was pretty sure of myself. Veronica Swan, an eager girl with long, twisty auburn hair that was my vanity, who loved horses and science and hated laundry and term papers. I thought one person could do what a whole system had not. Everything had come easy to me in my life. Everything except the one and most important thing, which became the only thing that mattered. And so, I believed that I had survived the beautiful late fall day when Scott Early drenched our lives in blood, for a purpose. I thought that if I didn't walk in the path of that purpose, when my time came to die, whether I lived to be 20 or 90, I would pass over, knowing that I'd failed Becky and Ruthie in the life hereafter as I'd failed them on earth, and I would not be able to face my baby sisters when they came running to me in heaven. Chapter 1. At the moment when Scott Early killed Becky and Ruthie, I was hiding in the shed. It wasn't because I was afraid. I wasn't afraid to die then, and I'm not afraid now. It was because we were playing hide and seek. My little sisters always started begging me the minute my parents left me to babysit. "Ronnie, Ronnie, Ronnie," they would tease me, pulling on my shirt while I tried to straighten up the kitchen. "Betcha we can find you this time. Betcha on our chores." And I would always give in, warning them that if they didn't find me, they were going to spend 2 hours until Mama got back, picking up every crayon and every sticker book in their room. "This time, I'm not kidding, Thing 1 and Thing 2, I told them that day. "I'm not going in there right before Mama gets home and pull all your clean clothes and markers out from under your bed." "I promise, solemnly," Becky said. I had to laugh. Her teeth were purple from the berries she'd eaten for breakfast. Becky was as thin and fast as a minnow in a creek and seemed to live practically on air. Ruthie was as round and slalom as a little koala bear. Her favorite thing was to eat cookie dough right from the bowl. They wanted to play outside because it was a really warm, sunny day for November, not that it's ever too cold at the edge of what's practically the Mojave Desert. The purples and yellows and reds of the changing trees that day were as flashy as a marching band. And so, an hour later, I was crouched down in the shed, behind a big sack of potting soil and a crate of clay, hoping a spider didn't pick that time to crawl up my back. I couldn't see my little sisters, but I imagined that they were leaning against the picnic table, where we ate our supper almost every summer night when the bugs weren't bad, our own tomatoes and sweet corn, sometimes with tacos and black beans, listening to the birds making their go-to-sleep sounds. Becky and Ruthie most likely had their little hands over their eyes, counting fast so that they could yell out, "Ready or not, here I come!" Ruthie would call first, I knew. She always did, and Becky always shushed her, saying there was no way she could have gotten to 100 yet because she, Becky, was older and she hadn't got up to 50. I know they didn't peek, because I'd told them peeking wasn't fair, and that I wouldn't play unless they played fair. That day, though, they never made a sound. I figured they were counting to 100 silently, because whenever we played hide-and-seek, Becky would count straight up as fast as she could, and Ruthie, who was only 4, would say out loud, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 14, 15, 10. Becky would get so confused she'd have to start all over again. But 5 minutes went by, and still, they never made a sound. When it got to be a long time, I opened the door, and I saw my sisters lying there like little white dolls in great dark pools of paint. I saw Scott Early, a young man with short blonde hair, sitting on the picnic table, wearing only his boxers and a dirty t-shirt, sobbing as if they were his little sisters, as if a terrible monster had come along and done this, which was sort of what he did think, though I didn't know that then. It was a good thing, a doctor later said to my mother, that Becky and Ruthie didn't cry out. It meant that they died quickly. They barely felt a thing. They must never have heard Scott Early come walking barefoot across our lawn. The merciful Father shielded them from fear. Being cut across the carotid artery is a very quick way to die. I knew that, even then, from biology. But it's not over in an instant, and I prayed for months that Becky and Ruthie never had time to wonder why I wasn't there to help them. For I was always there to help them. Though I was only 12, almost 13, Mama could trust me to look after the little girls alone, even if she had to be out in the part of the shed that was her studio or at the galleries, as far away as St. George, for hours at a time. "You are as responsible as any mother, Ronnie," Mama told me quietly one night, after the time Becky's hand got burned. Becky had been impatient that morning for her cheesy eggs and reached up to see if they were finished while I was cooking. She burned her hand on the pan. Mama said I had presence of mind because I didn't start to cry or panic when Becky screamed. I didn't try to put butter on the burn, which my own grandma would have done, because that would have made it worse. From the first aid section of health class Mama taught me, I remembered that a burn had to be cooled down with water right away, or the heat inside would keep right on burning the skin, and the damage would go deeper. I put Becky's hand under the cold water tap for 5 minutes, and wrapped ice in a thick towel and taped it down around her hand. Then I ran, pulling Becky and Ruthie in the wooden wagon down to our nearest neighbor, Mrs. Emery, who drove us to Pine Mountains Clinic 10 miles away, between our house and Cedar City. At the clinic, the doctor, a young woman, placed a net shield and gauze under a bandage on Becky's palm. The doctor spoke so gently to Becky that I suppose it was then that I first thought I would become a doctor one day myself. I wondered if the incident meant I was called to it. Becky had just a tiny scar on one finger after her hand healed. Our pediatrician, Dr. Pratt, said he wouldn't have done one thing different himself, except to drive her to a hospital. But there wasn't a real hospital within 50 miles of where we lived at the foot of a pine-covered ridge. Where we lived wasn't even really a town. It was a sort of settlement for people like my father, who always said he liked his elbow room.